Look at that. We're live. That's how fast we go live. I press the
Hello,
button.
everyone.
I press the button. And we're
Welcome
live.
to Roll for Combat Live, where Steven's about to make an intro.
Oh, I am about to do an intro. So, we never do this. We sometimes jump in too fast. So, this is what I'm going to say. For those of you brand new, this is how it works. We talk about stuff, anything, for like 10, 15 minutes. Then we'll get into some news. There's actually a fair amount of news topics this week. Not a lot, but there's some pretty big ones that you might not have heard of, because one of them was breaking news that happened today that I'll talk about. That's not even on the channels. And then we'll get into the main topic, which we've already talked about adventures in so many different ways, and I was trying to think of another way to do it. But specifically, I'm going to talk about a little bit about backwards compatibility of how WoTC is going to be making their current adventures work with 5.5, or whatever the heck we're calling D&D 2024, because they have a plan, and the Infinite Staircase comes out next week. So how is that going to work? Because all the past adventures have had a very hard break, like between editions, and what that means in terms of adventure design. Because I think already their adventures are kind of mid, and after this new thing they're going to do, I think it's going to get even worse, is my personal opinion. So if you want to hear why I think their adventure is going to get much worse, stick around.
And I have a new idea just based on all of the times we've talked about similar topics, listening to guests and doing some research. So I have something that's completely different to say that may agree in some ways with Steven and disagree with him, possibly strongly in others. So stick around to see what we agree on and what we disagree on.
Oh, and then Baron's just going to be the ref?
Yeah, I guess I'll just I'll Mystery Science 5000 you guys, or whatever the heck that show
Mystery
is.
Science Theater 3000. Come on,
3000. I've never watched that show.
My favorite show. I've seen Joel live multiple times. I used to circulate the tapes myself. Oh God, I loved it. I've seen Side Hackers and Pod People 1,000 times. Oh, I love that show. Anyhow,
Side Hackers and Pod People.
That's right. And Mitchell. Anyhow, how are you, Baron? Haven't spoken to you in a while.
It's been a minute. Yeah. How have you been?
Ugh, you know how I've been.
Yeah.
But the one good news is my dog, who I showed a few weeks ago, who has brain cancer.
So sad.
Well, I think COVID saved her, because people in my family, she was really doing badly, and they wanted to, and the vet was like to put her down, and everyone said to put her down. Everyone's like, oh, her quality of life is bad and you don't want her to suffer. And I got COVID last week, and I'm like, no, I refuse to put my dog down. I refused. And
Right.
I was so sick that we couldn't do it, and we had other things going on. And now she's doing really well. I mean, she still has a brain tumor, and she does this thing where she walks around in circles, but she's kind of back to her old self. So
Is she in remission?
not remission. She's on the same drugs humans take
Oh,
to
okay.
shrink the swelling in her brain. And she does this thing. It's very common in dogs when they get tumors, that they walk around in circles all the time. But
That's
she's
interesting.
Yeah, but she barks, and she's like hanging out. She sleeps a lot more, but she's pretty much the same dog. So, COVID saved her life, I think.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So
Well, hopefully it keeps up for a little while longer. She gets to
Well,
enjoy time on Earth a little while.
she's doing better
More.
every day. She's hanging out with me right now. So I'm actually quite a good turn in the craziness, because I had two people in my family, or close people, die in the same week, and the next day my dog was diagnosed with cancer in her brain. So it was kind of a rough week. How about you, Baron?
Well, I've fully rested and recovered, and I've come off of the insanity that was Green Dragon Fest. And
Green Dragon. What is Green
Green
Dragon Fest? Is that when you went momentarily insane and decided to run your own convention and realized
that is exactly what it was.
wow, that was a bad idea.
I know. Well, it was very scary. It was one of those down to the wire risky. It was definitely the riskiest thing I've ever done in my life financially. There was a moment there where I thought I might have to sell my house, but
Holy crap.
That is quite an indictment of running a con yourself.
It's like run a convention, succeed or lose your house.
yeah, well, so the deal was is that it wasn't just any old convention. It was an influencer resort convention at a location called Ancient Lore Village in Knoxville, Tennessee, that I think Grace World Destroyer said it best on her podcast that she does with Bob World Builder. A legally distinct, not Shire. But no, it was so the venue was great. They catered all the food. The vibe was very different than what you would expect from a normal convention. Everybody, like, there were only 45 guests and 11 dungeon masters. All of the dungeon masters were game designers and influencers from around YouTube and the internet, and it was a great time. Yeah. It was phenomenal. It's completely changed my perspective on how conventions might or should be run. Like, I am going to Gen Con, but my relationship to Gen Con now has totally changed now that I've, experienced what Green Dragon Fest could be. It was a lot more work than I thought it was going to be by far. But I did sign a contract to do it again next year. So I'm in the process of rebuilding the website because there's a bunch of features I want to add to the website that I learned I would need if I did it again this year. So lots of growing pains, tons and tons of growing pains.
You know the definition of insanity, right?
Yeah, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results.
Well, if you do need help, I've actually added another list to my things. Is my friend of mine here runs a convention, and I've helped him with it. And it's actually a tattoo convention, believe it or not.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. I'm secretly really into tattoos, believe it or not. Like really into them.
Do you have any?
No. But I really
so
like them.
Into them that he
likes them.
I like them. Oh, I love them. I love watching like the tattoo shows, and I just think they're fascinating. So my friend who basically has a tattoo parlor here, and he's also a huge gamer and geek. He ran a tattoo convention in Westchester, so I helped him with that. So I learned a lot from him about running a con, and that was like at a convention center, so that was like a real one. And then he also runs a gaming convention. Actually, it was just like 2 weeks ago was the comic convention, so I've learned a lot from him about how it works. But yeah, it sounds horrible. That's what I learned. It's that everything he told me about it sounded horrible.
Yeah, so. it was 95 times more work than what I thought it was going to be. And I'm glad I woke up to realize that about 5 months before the convention started. I don't know. It was like everything just kind of started really clicking into how much work everything was going to be, how much time everything was going to take. That was really the biggest shocker. Is just how much time everything takes. Like, you think, oh, that's just a 5-minute email. No, that took you half a day, at best. So yeah, that's my experience.
Yeah, being the connector person to just a large group of anything always takes way more time than you think it does, unless you have done it so often that you've learned to account for the extra way more that it takes.
Right. Yeah. I one thing I will say coming away from this, like, being in an actual, like, I've never really done like what's the word I'm looking for? Like, yes, I've been in leadership positions, but never in a situation where I've had so many spinning plates and being in a people organization role in this capacity. And I completely underestimated just how much actual, like, interdialogue between people, how much time that really takes. And in order to get that right, and I did not always get that right. So a lot of learning.
But yeah, I guess a coordinator role might be.
Yeah. But
You're looking for something like that.
yeah, no, definitely something I'll be thinking about is hiring an assistant to do it with me next year for sure.
Well, why don't you just have you noticed that these conventions always have 10,000 volunteers?
Yeah, I know, right?
Seriously.
I had my wife and Grace World Destroyer said she would be happy to help if I paid her in food. So...
Oh, that's what most of these volunteers do.
Yeah, so
you know what? When we're at Gen Con, I'll introduce you to some people who also do this.
Okay.
That can help you. That I'm working with for my own stuff. Because like I have all my games being run. I have tons of games being run at Gen Con, but I'm not running any of them. So
yeah,
have them have these people are very good. They organize. It's actually the same people we're going to be hanging out with Professor. So
okay.
It's the same guys. Professor knows him too. Actually, Professor introduced me to him, who now introduced you to him, and Kelsey's using him too. So
is this the
Matt? Yeah.
Yes, I think I've met him one time.
You met him.
Before.
We played the Kobold game with him last year.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but can introduce you in a more serious capacity. How about that?
Right.
So.
Rather than just some random YouTuber.
See, look, business. You're watching deals being done live.
Right. For you 87 people watching right now.
Hey, man.
That's
Let's
right.
get on to the topic.
Let's
you guys
talk about this.
Let's
I'm
talk
really
about
excited.
why the heck
news.
D&D?
There's big news.
Oh, we
There's
got
big
news
news
first.
Okay, first, big news. You ready? Kyle Brink gone. He's out of D&D. He's gone.
Oh, wow. Well,
is that big news? Because according to LinkedIn, he's been unemployed from WoTC since May.
Well, this is what happened. According to LinkedIn, it said former executive producer D&D, and then a few outlets reached out to WoTC to confirm it. And just a few hours ago, I was watching some of the other YouTubers and said, yes, it was confirmed that he is gone or left, and there's someone else, I forgot her name, was replaced him. But
if I was him, I wouldn't necessarily have wanted to stay. He was clearly in a very precarious position where he was the one who had the creative staff sort of under him. He was like the manager. He was the one who made the voice of those people on those big smoke-filled rooms where the executives met, and it was clearly seemed like that would be a very stressful position that would kind of sandwich you in between the two sides.
Big smoke-filled rooms. What do you think we're doing? You think this is like the 50s, Mark? We're like,
I know they're no longer literally smoke-filled, but that is now an expression to mean those places where the brokers of power meet.
Oh, okay.
Brokers of Dungeons and Dragons power.
It's like instead of cigarettes, it's like censers of incense instead.
Right, exactly.
Braziers. Yeah, according
Sniffing
to
up all of that Nog Champa.
According to LinkedIn, he's left in May. But I mean, it's not. It's like, okay, there's a lot of people, but it was pretty notable because he was the front face for the whole OGL scandal. He was the face of OGL.
He was the one who was made to go or who decided to go for, we don't know one way or the other.
He was voluntold, most likely.
I think he was voluntold.
Yes.
And because I've been in middle management positions like the one that he is in, and it was very likely that he was voluntold because he was just high enough on the chain to have to take responsibility while not quite being high enough to actually get the people who really make the decisions to listen to him.
Yeah. But he is no more. So, and they did it very quietly again. Very quietly. The other big one is the Ennies came out, the nominations, and there's a couple of, it's funny because people are like, I don't recognize anyone on this list.
What are they talking about?
Well, I recognize
These are really recognizable this year.
I'm like, well, that's the other thing. I was like, okay, I think last year, I was like, okay, I don't recognize any of these. It was very esoteric last year, but this year I recognize almost everyone. But of course, we're also in the industry, and I have half these books. But we're going to have to razz on Kelsey a little when we hang out with her because she got a lot of nominations.
Yeah.
She got more than I think has ever been given to any Gen Con recipient.
No, not that. No, no.
I don't think so.
No, not
Really?
even close.
Not
no.
even close.
Not even close.
And for one product?
She got 5. Paizo in one of the ones a long time ago, I think won like 10 or more in the same year, and they won.
Wow. Okay.
There was some wild amounts. There was, back in the day, there was a certain period of time where there was like 1 year where they won a ton of awards. But 5 is excellent. And at least in recent memory, I don't remember the last time that it was in between that sort of time when Paizo was doing it until now. And when Paizo was doing it, like, to be clear, they had sort of the advantage of doing Dragon and Dungeon magazine. People knew who they were. So if they could get nominated, a lot of people would vote for them because they knew what it was. And they didn't always know what the other nominees were. It was kind of like a big advantage in the final round.
Right. It was just whoever. It was really more of just a fan base contest at that point. It wasn't a...
well, it was judges first, so if it wasn't good enough to be nominated, but according to the judges, it wouldn't make it in at all. But then past that, usually the biggest RPG with the highest fan base who got nominated would win back in those days.
Right.
Then there was sort of an intervening era where there was like some stuff going on, and one of the organizers resigned. And some companies did not submit during that time, Paizo included. And now it looks like this is one of the first times Paizo has gone back to submitting after that. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Hopefully they got everything back together in the NEs. But Stephen, I haven't heard anyone say that they haven't heard of any of the things this year in the NEs. Where did you see people saying that?
Well, I watch
very recognizable.
Well, I watch like every single YouTuber, and so
Fair
some
enough.
of them were just like, "Oh,
so people don't know Justin Alexander or Kobold Press or Shadow Dark."
Yeah, but some of them were like, no, there's definitely in here, but like,
or Hit Point Press, or like any of these.
There was like,
nobody's heard of any of those.
Well, there was the Devil's Bridge or Bloom for Best Adventure. I mean, I actually haven't heard of either of
there's
those.
always a few that maybe people haven't heard of as much, and that's because the judges get everything, and they'll find some that they're just like, this is really good, even though maybe the judges hadn't heard of it until they received it for that year. But saying that they hadn't heard of anything in here, I'm just looking through like Free League. Like, this is a list of companies that I think most people would have heard of. Paizo, of course.
Obviously, yeah.
Yeah, I actually don't kill me, Mark. I didn't submit anything this year.
That's fine.
I kind of forgot.
That's fine. I'm on the nominations list already. Because while I did not work directly on the remaster, it is a compilation of a book that I did work a lot on, and I am still on the cover of it because of Paizo's policy. If a certain percentage of your work is in the book, then you go on the cover.
That's
and
right.
It still is.
Yeah, I keep, so just so you know, it's a huge amount of work to get your books out there. You have to send like 6 books, one of each to each judge, and they're all over the world.
And an extra to be auctioned off, right?
Yeah, it's like a lot. It's a fair amount of work. And before I was doing it myself, I guess I should have just told the warehouse to send them, and I could have made this a lot easier. So also this year, well, I'm looking here, the amount of companies when I did it a couple years ago, and that was that pre-COVID? Or right after? No, it was right after. I don't remember, but there was the list was insane. It was endless of how many people were submitting, and that was one of those years. I think like Thirsty Sword Lesbians won, and I didn't recognize anyone. I recognized like 5% of the people being nominated that year.
You didn't recognize Thirsty Sword?
No,
Lesbians?
that was part of the 5% I did recognize. There was a lot that I didn't, and I was just like, I don't recognize any of these things. And I felt I was basically dismayed. Like, okay, I didn't think it was worth it. And now, of course, now this year when I see like Hit Point Press and Kelsey on there, and a lot of people who are I consider equals in my mind, and I was like, I think we could have made it. I think a couple of ours, definitely best cartography. I think like we could have done pretty well with that because our cartography is insanely good, to say the least. I think our covers are really good. I think we could have made it. I think our art
You would have
interior,
at least made a showing.
our art interior
Would have been worth doing it,
We
just
have a
be
lot.
part of it. I do not know what's happening behind the scenes, but I trust Paizo from the time that Paizo withdrew, that was the right decision. And the fact that they're back in now means I trust that something has changed that makes it that it is a good time to be submitting.
it
So
doesn't
I think you should.
I'm definitely going to resubmit, and it doesn't seem to be like there's. I see things here submitted like that are not new at all. Like, what was in here, which I was like, okay, it's up to like its 10th version. Is hold on. What was the thing? What did the thing we play? Oh, Cobalt's Ate My Baby is in here. I was like, come on, Cobalt's Ate My Baby. That thing has been around forever, and that still was
Sure,
like,
but it got a new product, so it can be in there. So.
right. And so I will be able to do that. So I'll get it in there
19th
again.
edition.
Yeah, well, right. It's
Yeah.
I always have a new version of something. It'll be fine. So next year, just remind me. Put it on your calendar, Mark. Remind me around March to say tell Steve.
It should be on March. Okay,
Around-
great. I have a bunch of things on my calendar for March because of the fact that that is when S Corp taxes are due. So I will also
There you go.
put Annie's.
Any
Steven.
nominate Steven.
Okay, so let me ask you guys a question here before you move on to your next news topic, if that's not the last one.
Keep going. Yeah. Go
If
ahead.
you were to host your own, what's the word? Award ceremony for RPGs.
We already talked about this, by the way.
Did we?
Yeah.
Did
No,
we?
you weren't part of it.
Sort of.
We
Steven,
did.
Steven talked about that he would want to separate out ones that are for designers over ones that are for topics into different categories. He talked about it a little, but Baron, please.
Wait, keep finishing.
Yeah.
Finish
No,
what you're
I'm
saying.
curious. What categories would you create? If you could create no more than 8 categories,
Ooh.
ideally 5,
Oh,
what
that's
categories would you
tough.
create?
I wouldn't do more than that. That's the thing. I would have a lot of categories. See, I'd go the opposite because I feel there aren't enough categories, and I feel the ending categories are pretty good, but there's almost like mainstream, like there's like indie versus mainstream, and so.
Okay, when you say indie versus mainstream, are you saying like should we have the same categories twice, one for 5e products, one for not?
Either that way, or you have it for companies of certain sizes, because
Small press versus large press.
large,
for
right,
example.
exactly, yeah. Because in the past,
So
I felt like this.
where do you draw the line at that threshold? Because like Kobold Press employs what, 8 people? Maybe.
No, it's a little tricky, but the point is like
Yeah.
there were these years where Paizo just won every single award, and it was like
Right.
it was almost like don't even bother, like they just won everything, and it was almost
Right.
unfair.
Well, that's also probably if that's true, there's something
It was true.
systemically an issue with the judgeship.
Mhm.
You
Well,
know,
I mean,
if they're
that was-
or they're doing a terrible job of facilitating getting the word out and getting creators to create or to submit
Mhm.
to the thing. Like that sounds like a failure on the awards organizers.
I think
not
that the
Paizo.
year that it happened, that the products that were nominated, I feel like were fairly nominated because they were it was mostly, for instance, that one year, like Shackled City Adventure Path, for example, won 3 categories because it was a big adventure. So it was nominated for adventure, a campaign setting because it had one in there, and cartography, for instance. So,
right.
and it definitely was an extremely good book that should be nominated. But then once it gets nominated, at least with the way it is with public voting, since it was well known, it was very likely to win
Right.
at least bronze. And so it wound up with 2 gold and 1 silver.
See, I feel like that sort of thing is a failure on the awards ceremony system itself. Like the right way to do this, I feel, is
do
to
the voters first and the judges second.
is to do the judges second, where everybody gets a digital version of the thing that, or maybe a sample in PDF format.
You can submit
And they
as
can-
PDF, by the way, but I think
Right.
you don't
But
do
then
as well.
all of like you can sign up to be a, what is it? Like a community voter. And it goes through, you have to have at least 200 of these people, right? At the bare minimum, 100. But 200 is a good number. And just let them rank them like 1 to 10 or something. And then the best 8 of those go to the nomination with the judges. That's the way that should be go. That's the way it should work.
Doing judges second would help smaller ones to win in that stage. Actually, and to be frank, what I'm saying now is based on like the pre-Paizo withdrawing phase of the way that Annie's rules work. They may have changed it, but
Right.
it had ranked choice voting even way back in the day for the voters to do. But as I understand it,
there was
a
no
lot-
way for the most of the people to know like what to get, and like you could just go in and say, I'm gonna vote for, because I remember the platform, I'm gonna vote for these 3 things and abstain from voting on all the others.
Yes, exactly. That was the
And
big issue, was abstaining
that's the
from the
problem.
ones that people didn't know.
Right. So if you set it up so that every single person had to vote for at least for at least 5 randomly chosen things, like rank this on a scale of 1 to 10 for all these different categories, then, and you just get randomly assigned the ones that you have to vote on, like that'll get you a much truer representation of what the community feels is most appropriate as a winner. And then the top 8 from those go to an actual judges panel.
I mean, I like what you're saying here, Baron. It sounds like
Right.
to me that Green Dragon Con doesn't have enough like work and stuff for you to do. Maybe next year you should organize the Green Dragon Awards so that you can add more onto your plate. I mean, you are getting
Right.
you're getting 2 assistants, so that means you could just increase the amount on your workload and do one that's exactly like that for Green Dragon Con.
Mark
That's
is
hilarious.
joking, but it would get you a massive amount of press.
Really?
Yeah, if you did your
Oh,
own
man.
awards. You know
I'm
that.
joking, but it would get you a massive amount of
All right.
but it is so expensive in time and energy to do this that you should know that, just like you found out that coordinating the convention was,
Of course.
and
It's
it
gonna take
sounds like
95
it's a lot
times
of
more
work, but it is ridiculous amounts of work.
Right.
I mean,
That's
we
fun.
do our own because we already do a contest. It's for this thing, Battlezoo Bestiary, Strange and Unusual, or Battlezoo Bestiary, just Battlezoo Bestiary, or Battlezoo Bestiary, Elemental Storm, which is coming out in Kickstarter in just a few weeks. And you too can sign up now if you go to, Kickstarter.rollforcombat.com, and we got the new cover out. In fact, if you go there, you can see the cover. Look at that thing. This is what we're putting out, man. And we have this thing as a contest, but I also am insane, as everyone knows, and I created an entire website to automate the voting process. So,
This is true.
That's what I would do. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was very hard. I mean, and I do
As
this for a
difficult
living.
as ours is to do, though, what Baron is suggesting is even harder
So good
for
luck,
a variety
Baron.
of reasons.
And I do it for a living, so
What would make it so much harder?
Okay, what makes it a little bit harder? Okay, to be fair, Steven did make a monster submission tool that you would not have to do, but is that Battlezoo Bestiary Strange and Unusual would be just one of the books that people have to review,
Right.
right? And that's only the monsters that won our contest. So it is true that there were more monsters submitted for that contest, but when you look at the volume of books that you might receive, assuming that you were successful, the judges in particular are difficult to find and compensate. The number of hours that they need to put into it is massive.
So
Even
it's
with
not
the fact that-
necessarily like my actual labor. It's the
Oh,
labor
well.
of the judges and coordinating them. That makes
and
sense.
coordinating them, yes.
Yeah.
Plus, also your idea, which is really cool, of getting out excerpts that would be used for scoring to a very wide pool of community voters,
Right.
will require you to coordinate with all of the submitters in a way that we wouldn't have had to do if they just submitted their work, or require you
would-
to read everything and find what you wanted to curate to be the section that would be sent
Yeah.
in, which would then potentially have the submitters feeling that it was biased because you didn't give a representative sample of their work because they weren't the ones who decided, and they're like, that wasn't our best section. Why did you send that section to the reviewers?
Right.
And so
right.
it's worse because ours is an automated submission of the monster. Once they put it in, it counted their number of words. Was it under that? Great. Then the community members just look at it and give it ranks, and we give the top ones to the judges to look at. And there's only, I mean, sure, there's like several hundred monsters for the judges to look up, but we split it among the judges. It's not as bad. I think that there's a lot of logistics and effort into it. There's a bigger payoff for doing a TTRPG wide award ceremony than just a monster contest for Pathfinder and D&D, but it's also very challenging.
Okay.
Yeah. Keep in mind, I'm the king of automation. So, like, it's all, I had this thing down to a science. I mean, it like emails the judges and tells them what monsters they have left. I mean, and then literally Mark and I just go in and look at them and figure out the winners, and that's it.
Right. Yeah, I would set up a system to do that too.
It's fairly automated at this point. So, but it took months to build that system. I mean, it was a huge amount of effort. So,
and Steven, you have like people who build websites that just work for you in your day job that you could use, right?
Yeah. I basically took them off and had them do this. And,
right.
Yeah, these are
what most people have.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And also, I build these type of sites for a living, so it wasn't that hard. And Mark sometimes tells me, oh, it would be good. Not so much, we kind of have it down, but he'd be like, let's fix this. And I just go in and redo, like, we'll fix the site. Like, we'll update the site to make it better for people. So,
like, I wanted to change the scores you grade on, like the categories, based on feedback from some of the judges and the community judges. And Steven did. It was very easy, but he had to go in and change the website for that.
Yeah, but I didn't even tell you the craziest part. Are you ready for the craziest part, Baron?
Let's hear it.
It takes all the winners and it exports it into an InDesign file.
Into an InDesign file.
Yes, that's how I get all the monsters.
Hold on. Are you lying to me right now?
No,
it really
I
does.
swear
into a
to
CSV,
God.
and the CSV is already linked to the InDesign file.
It basically, that's how nuts. Because I'm very good at this. I'm good at what I do.
It can be developed and edited in the website by the developer and editor, and then once it's ready for layout, it is exported to InDesign. It's a wild ride. It's actually a very nice process. Having worked on Bestiaries at Paizo as well as Battlezoo Bestiary Strange and Unusual, it's actually pretty nice to work with in that system.
It at least gets you 90% of the way there.
Well, I told you, king of automation. I was like, I'm having this whole thing done. And it wasn't that hard because InDesign's incredibly powerful. It's basically a JSON file.
ActionScript's a hell of a drug, too.
It's a JSON file. And then InDesign can read JSON. So there's an import. And then I still have to clean it up, but it's like 90% there.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
It's I could, if I really went insane, do 100%.
Yeah, but that's not worth it. Just
no, the last
it in
10% is not worth it. It's just easier to do it by hand. So, no, but it all gets in. And that's on purpose because there's a lot of mistakes get made, especially for monsters. So I made sure that it just imports it. So that's why I said whatever's on the website is what's going to get put into the book. So you got to be.
But that still doesn't answer my question. Before we get into why are D&D adventures so mid?
Yeah.
What do you think would be?
What are the 8 categories, Steven? You're forced to condense it to 8.
Come on.
And even if you decide to do the small press versus large press thing, that gives you even fewer categories.
Like let's say that you cannot. So large press is any organization that makes more than, let's say, $1 million in revenue a year.
Okay.
For the past 5 years. That way, if somebody has like a blowout Kickstarter, like for example, like Kelsey Dion at Arcane Library or Dungeon Dad, or excuse me, not Dungeon Dad, Dungeon Coach with his DC-20, he would not qualify. So you have to make more than $1 million a year in revenue over the past 5 years. That's the qualifier. So like Chaosium, Paizo, Wizards of the Coast, they'd all fall into that category.
I don't know. I mean, I'm looking at these these are pretty good categories. I mean, they have their own here. Like they have Best Adventure long form, Best Adventure short form. I kind of like that.
What do you adventure meaning like less than less or more than 10,000 words.
Well, whatever.
Is that-
It would be some
whatever
definition. It would
yeah.
be like a certain amount of words. I do like best art for cover, best art interior, probably best. Let's see. Well, they have quote
This
best.
is really
they have, like,
rough
best
to get it down to
game.
8.
But best game is tricky. But it would have to have. You would have to have. You see, I personally would probably have more categories for best game. You know, I would have like best science fiction, best fantasy, best horror. That would be me.
Right.
I do also like best layout and design. You see, best production values, that's kind of the same as layout and design, so I don't think that's like
No, you gotta award people who take the time to like actually go to the printing press and say, what kind of paper am I getting? What kind of, am I doing a cloth cover, a leatherette cover?
I agree with you, but if I only have 8, I'm not going to do it.
That's the thing.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
Fair.
Right. So I think I'm up to 5. And then they have like, see, they have best setting, and I do think we should have like a best lore. So I wouldn't even have like best setting. I would call it best lore, which kind of is setting, by the way. So that's 6. And then you have like, they have like product of the year. You have to have that, so that's 7. And then it would be
like a best in show.
Yeah, but then they have like best supplement, best writing, something like one of those. It's like, so it's really like, it would almost be so like best supplement that's not lore, like a best lore one. So, because like if you think about it, you have like core rules, you have monster books, which could be supplements. You have lore.
That's also best adversary in this one, but it depends on what you want to do.
Right, and then you have like best. I mean, there's like these 4 or 5 core book types that are in RPGs, so I would try to get all of those in there, and then adventures
like Gazeter / splat book.
Right, and then I do like adventures having multiple categories for adventures. I wouldn't even have more than 2. I'd probably even have like long, medium, and short, kind of like how they have for novels and in the
short stories, novellas, and novels.
Right. Yeah. So I think I would do the same thing, and then lots for art, because art is a massive part. I'd have more than even 2. I'd probably have like they have cartography, but I'd have even like I'd have to think of the categories. But as I said, if I did this, I would have a lot of categories. The problem with a lot of categories is that you need a lot of judges.
Yeah, you already have done more than 8. So
I know, no, but I was saying what I would like. But I did the 8. I did 8. I then went on top of that because that's what I do.
So I agree that it should be a lot of categories. Baron, for my 8, I would play a few tricks to keep things at 8 categories. So I agree with Steven about the small press. What I would do is I would catch that in the way that the awards are awarded. So let's say we're going to keep it somewhat close to gold, silver, and copper, just because that's what ENnies are and that's what we're looking at right now. It doesn't have to be, but I would also give the kind of the small press award to whatever the top one was that went under the small press category. And that means you could get gold and small press if you're just the best. If you win period and you're small, even though there would be lots of voters for the bigger ones, you can win them both.
Right.
And then I would also get rid of having to do a category for product of the year by making it so that product of the year is automatically something from one of the other categories that is the best of the gold winners in the other categories. It's sort of like a tournament of champions.
Dog show.
Yes, exactly right.
Take every dog class and run them up against one another.
And that does mean that it will be a little different, because the best product of the year for ENnies is always like a big product. And so there's no chance that like a small supplement or like a website or something from one of those categories usually would get put into the product of the year category. And in mine, it might, if that one just really swept for some reason, it could win the product of the year. And I would use the fact that I'm doing that to cut down on the number of other ones so that I could put in lots of game design related ones, because I like to give separate ones for layout and design and cover and all those other art, but I just don't think I can if I only have 8. I think I have to.
There's a fan award for best publisher, and that begins July 12th, and we're on the list. So
there you go.
We could still win. We can still win this thing.
We will not win, because it will be a big publisher that has lots of fans, because more than we do. We're mid-sized.
Challenge
Steven.
accepted.
Okay, Steven. If we win, then I will bring you like a giant goblet full of dice to indicate that you were correct that we won. But I don't think a mid-sized publisher can win the Fan Award for best publisher. It has to be a non-hated large-sized publisher.
Challenge accepted. I'll see. Hey, man, we'll see what we can do. It's the only thing I can get us on. So, because I forgot to nominate. This is Friday night. I gotta ask Kelsey. We gotta go to this thing with her.
Yeah.
It's open to anyone. So
yeah,
we'll go. I presume.
Okay. So shall we move on to? I want to hear Steven's pitch about these adventures, and then I want to give mine, which is like kind of weird.
Why are they so? I mean, I've got the basic bitch one.
Okay, here we go. Can
I curse on the stream?
I've been thinking about this. Wait. Yeah, now you
pitch
can.
A curse word.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. Okay, so I thought about this a lot. So this is my overall arching concept that adventures are basically in 3 categories. All right, you have your sandbox adventures, which are kind of like the Kingmaker adventure. That's probably one of the best well-known sandbox adventures. You have your framework adventures, which are these adventures that have good frameworks and a map and an overview, but are very light on details. And that's pretty much what all the first edition D adventures are, and all the new OSR adventures, like, these 2-3 page adventures that I have back here.
And they are scientifically the best kind of adventure.
Yeah, like I'm trying to pull one of these out, but you know what I mean. Like I have all these like very, very generic framework adventures where they give you the framework and they give you enough to actually make an adventure, but you have to fill in the details. And then you have, well, I call them story-based adventures, but people call them railroads. I call them roller coaster adventures. And that is very much what Paizo puts out. And those are basically mostly, linear adventures. And Paizo's really good at them, and that's kind of their bread and butter. And before we get started, I want to say none of these is better than the other. It is whatever your people like. Because, like, we tried a sandbox adventure with my group, and we hated it. Frameworks are okay. And I actually didn't like a framework adventure because I would always hear our DM at the time with Seth constantly complain about how much we were missing, and we'd hear more about the stuff we didn't do than the stuff we did.
That may be a GM issue.
That's a GMing issue right
there.
Well,
no, because he overwrote. That's why he wrote so much, and he just had too many ideas. And we have decided, at least our group, that we like railroads. Like, that is what we like. We want the railroad. We want the story. We want the experience. We are fine with that, and we love it. I love it. My players love it. And it just is, I know a lot of people like, oh, I hate railroad. And that's fine. That's fine. Our guys we hate sandbox, it's whatever your group likes. And we love it. We love a super strong story that you're along for the ride for. That is what we are enjoying. Right. So, with that being said, I think all adventures have to fall into one of those categories. And what's been happening is that these D&D adventures are falling into 2 or 3 of these categories at once. And because they're in multiple categories, they're bad at all of them. Because you can't be a railroading sandbox. Okay, it's like it doesn't work.
Okay, can you give me an example of one that does that in a way? Because I see what you're saying. Mm-hmm. But I feel like that's exactly what the Lost Mines of Findelver have done. And I think that might be the strongest level design or adventure design in the entire 5e adventure suite.
I think I agree with Baron on that.
Well, I think that's
you get a bunch of, it is like you start off with the rails. Mm-hmm. It's like, here's literally you come upon the goblin ambush.
Right.
And then the world kind of opens up to you. But each time you take a step in whatever direction that you think you want to go, they put you back on the rails until you get off the roller coaster again. It's like, okay, where do you want to go now?
Well, that's a railroad. That's still a railroad.
No, it's narrow, wide, narrow.
Yeah,
Okay,
like,
but
even Kingmaker, which you said was the quintessential sandbox, is absolutely narrow, wide, narrow. Okay, so
I disagree.
that is exactly what Kingmaker is. It is narrow. It goes super wide. You can do whatever you want. You will always have to come back to those touchstone narrow parts. Trust me, your group bounced off Kingmaker. My group, Linda, ran it for years and added more content. We played through it. It is narrow, wide, narrow.
No,
Sure.
it is narrow, wide, narrow. But let me rephrase it. Is
okay,
that
yeah, rephrase what you mean.
okay? With Kingmaker, it was narrow, wide, narrow, but the narrow sections could be so little as like a single encounter. Sometimes it's an entire fort. Sometimes it's an entire base you encounter, and sometimes it's literally just one monster on the bridge, you know? And that's the problem, is that we personally like this connected story, and it felt like a collection of short stories, okay? And to us, disconnected short stories, and we don't like that. We don't want a disconnected list of short stories, and that's probably a good example. The Lost Mines of Pandelver is big adventures loosely connected, and I'm okay with that, because that is large short stories that are connected. How about that? Is that a better analogy, as opposed to a loose analogy of short stories that aren't really connected?
Say it again. What did you call it?
Lost Mines of Pandelver is a large amount of short stories that are interconnected with each other and help create a single overlying adventure. And when you go to those different sections, they're big. They're not small. They're actually fairly large. So you get a big, meaty adventure when you go to each one. My issue with Kingmaker,
as opposed to like Icespire Peak, which fails in that.
Right. And Kingmaker also, for our group, failed because some of these, sometimes it was big. Like sometimes you would literally go to a fort and you would have to take on an entire fort, and that could take multiple sessions. Sometimes you would literally go to because you would go to hexes, and each hex would have something to do. Some of those hexes would be, there's people on a bridge and you hang out with them, you know, and it was like, that's the whole hex, you know, like it just felt very disconnected. So in my mind, it's lots of short stories of different lengths and sizes. Does that make sense?
So I'm going to posit something, Stephen. I was with you. And in fact, my analysis relies heavily on like about the first 70% of what you said when you started talking about things, splitting things up into being more sandboxy, with loose. I would even say instead of 3 types, there's 2 dimensions. There's 2 axes on this. Sandbox versus railroad on one axis, and like loose outline versus very detailed. Here's what I mean by that.
You're right.
A sandbox that has tons of everything, and every single detail on every hex is in the sandbox, and it's 1,000 pages long, is sandbox on that side and detailed on that side. Whereas one that is like one of those old like original D&D adventures that's like, here's a hex map, we'll barely tell you a little bit about stuff, you figure it out, is sandbox and more outlining. So, but it's very similar to your analysis of that split. Here is why I think that people are saying that recent adventures of D&D are mid or low. And it's not for the reason that I think a lot of people think. I actually cottoned onto it a little bit when Derek, on one of our recent episodes, was talking about how much he loved the 3rd edition series that ended with like the Chardalon, the Red Dragon. Here's the thing. I'm not old enough to have been through when people were actually playing those original adventures, but I certainly know what's in a fair number of them. All of the ones I lived through, if you went online, the discourse was that people didn't like them. In every edition, people didn't like the 2nd edition adventures during 2nd edition. They didn't like the 3rd edition adventures during 3rd edition. I didn't do 4th edition for that long, but during the time that I did, people were saying, no, this is just the adventure was bad, the system is good. And in 5th edition, a lot of people don't like the 5th edition adventures. I think, this is my personal opinion based on hearing that from Derek and realizing, wow, yeah, Derek said a lot of the people around him really liked those 3rd edition ones that I never heard of people who like. I thought they were cool. I think that there are these 2 axes. You can add a 3rd axis. You can divide it in whatever way you want. There are people who like adventures of whatever type. Like your group, Stephen loves railroads. Some groups love sandboxes. Whatever adventure is being put out today, if it's not the type that your group likes, you dislike it. And you're going to say that online. Whereas if you are the type who's like, yeah, I like this. I like that these 5, like, we got a few comments on some of our YouTube videos before when Steven was talking about 5e adventures from people, from a few people, just a few, who were like, no, I really like that 5e doesn't give me the details here and lets me fill it in. There are people who on the axis of detailed versus brief outline are more for the brief outline. But it's not serving the people who need the details. And those people are upset. And when you go into nostalgia mode and go back to the older ones, those are the people who were happy at the time, who didn't say anything, but who will always bring it up. They're the people like me who I like Diavecna Die in 82nd edition. It was great, I think. And I'll do that. Or people will bring up the original D&D adventures that if you look at them objectively, there are some things they're missing. They should probably be graded on a curve because they were coming up with some of these concepts in the first place. There'll be some people who are just like, no, though, even if you don't grade it on the curve, this is just the best. This is what we were at the time. And Derek saying those 3rd edition adventures were like that for his group made me realize it. When we look back at the ones we loved. When we talk now about adventures, we talk about the ones we don't like, that don't meet our needs. And that's why I think that forevermore, always we're going to hear about the adventures in the big dog D&D not being good from the people who aren't being served by that type of adventure. So that's my theory. It starts from where you went, Stephen, it went somewhere else.
Well, here, let me tell real quick. Someone...
I do like that take, Mark.
No, I think Mark's take is correct, is that there are multiple axes. I was just sort of... I think we're both right, but I do agree. There's more levels to this. I was just kind of being a little generic, and I'll explain why. Is that... Here's the thing, is that when you buy a Paizo adventure, you expect at least, pretty much, almost always, and they actually will tell you, hey, this is... They don't tell you it's a railroad. They almost all are. But when it is a sandbox, they'll say it's a sandbox, because all their adventures are railroads. And
they're usually high on railroad and details on those axes.
Extremely high on both. And they're a lot of fun to read. They're a lot of fun just to, just read. And you don't even have to run them because they have so much detail that you could read them almost as books. And I think, to me, those are my favorite types of adventures. But that's because, I read them as almost adventure novels. And I think when D&D was starting out, I think their initial adventures were pretty bad. Their new ones, the ones after, like the last couple years or a few years ago now, were really good. And recently, they've gotten really bad again. And what I wanted to say is that I was reading, so this all comes down to D&D Quest for the Infinite Staircase, comes out in 5 days. And this is weird because this is the last book and last adventure that's going to use the original 5th edition rule set. And these articles I was reading is that traditionally in the past, you have to do a hard break between editions. It's like, because they're not backwards compatible. Now, this one is supposed to be backwards compatible, and it's literally coming out like a month before, 2 months before the new rules come out. So they said this is how they're handling it. They said, this is an exact quote from Wizards. They said, when you see there's a cloaker in the room, the text won't say, quote, the cloaker uses phantasmal illusions to create 3 illusionary duplicates of itself, unquote, Armin said. It might just specify what the cloaker does without referencing that one-to-one text. What is done, it gives more general guidance in some places that's more intuitive, rather than making you feel like you need to go cross-reference a specific ability or trait in a book you don't have. So they're making, they are going to be mixing a detailed adventure with a framework. So traditionally, the whole reason people buy, at least I think, they buy these D&D adventures is because they want a railroad. And this sounds like it's going to be the worst of both worlds. It's like, well, it's a railroad in some places, but because this has to work with monsters that we literally haven't finished yet, because the book was written, a year ago, and they didn't have the monsters done, that they're making everything very generic. So it's going to be like the combination of very specific in some places and incredibly generic in others. And that sounds like the worst of both worlds. I was like...
So, Stephen, I'm not surprised you would say that. Here's what my analysis says about what Stephen would think based on being a railroad plus details guy.
Yeah.
And Steven is a Railroad plus details guy, and the details, as he said there, are more important than the Railroad. If you have an outline that has enough details, you said that it could be good for your group, as long as it's not too scattered or sporadic. And so my guess is that the people who are currently having the most issues with the D&D adventures are having issues because of being details lighter than they would want. Just based on hearing what people are complaining about in the adventures, they want more details. They're like, this didn't give me what I needed. I can't run this if I don't go online and find where somebody else gave me the rest of the details. And so I would predict that these adventures that are doing this will get worse for the people who they already currently are not serving well enough with the details. They're going to even more need to go and find another product or someone on Reddit who has filled those in.
Yes.
But I think that when they said they're going to make it easier to do it without lookup for some people, the people who currently do like to have the details light, kind of more like some of the very old school ones where it only gives you a little bit and you fill in the rest, maybe they will be, I don't know, roughly equally served here. I don't know that it really actually helps them to just say that it's illusion spell. It's more just that they can do it and be compatible with both versions, but it probably won't hurt them as much. So I think we will see more complaints about the new adventures for the reason in my access analysis here that it is getting more extreme on the axis that people already in some demographics had serious problems with.
Okay, we'll let you talk in 1 second, Baron. Okay, here, I just want to give an example. So here's a good example of The Waking of Willow Hall by our friend
Willoughby Hall.
Willoughby Hall, yes. Which Professor Dungeon Master said it was, I think, his favorite adventure of all time.
It's a great adventure.
It's great. It's really good. We got this. I got it for free. Did you get it free last year, Mark?
Which one? The Making of Willoughby?
Yeah.
I did not.
No, sorry, I meant Baron. Baron was with me.
Said,
Ben Milton.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, Ben Milton just handed them out
Ben
to
Milton
us.
gave me a copy and signed it.
Oh, I didn't get my signed. I just got it from him. But he's like, oh, I got a whole bunch of these, and he just gave them out. This is a great idea. This is a framework adventure. I mean, look at that, an entire adventure in like 2 pages. It's amazing, like the map and everything. It is a fun adventure. Now, and then he has all the hooks and everything. You know, here's the thing: is that this adventure is like what, $10-15? Quest for the Infinite Staircase is $70. If I'm paying $70 for an adventure,
And it's 200 pages long.
Yeah, and
at
it's
least
250
pages.
I want details. Okay, I don't want a 200-page, like, $70 adventure that is a framework. Okay, that is. I don't even know what that is. It's like it's
a really good framework.
Yeah, but it's not going to be because they're putting in a lot of details. And here's the crazy part: the early reviews I've been hearing is that, like, okay, I told you that the Vecta adventure doesn't even have Vecta in it, and Vecta's like in it for 2 pages, and he's in the background. And that's it. I was looking
at some ripped D&D Online, or what is it, D&D Beyond printout of the adventure earlier.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous.
In the last chapter, there's like one encounter.
Yeah, there's one encounter and he's in the background. It's like, that's it. And I was like, okay. And I heard Quest for the Infinite Staircase is supposed to like center around Zargon and like, this genie. And they're like, it's not in the adventure. He's like, they said, at least the reviews I've been reading, they're not in the adventure. I'm like, why do they keep doing this? Like, why do they just like, shouldn't you like, I don't know.
There are techniques you have to use to bring a recurring villain through the adventure. And I've seen them done well in some adventures where you use like illusory projections or messages left behind. Because if you actually throw them in anywhere where even they're 10 miles away from the PCs, but you know where they're going to be, there's a chance that the PCs will just go there and kill them, and then the adventure is over. So it gets tough. I understand that completely. There are ways to do it, though, where you're like, this is a hazard. It's like a creeping manifestation of this character, or sending in some kind of foreboding foreshadowing through various other encounters.
We did it. There's ways. I mean, yes, it's incredibly hard. And in fact, I've seen this. That's actually one of my biggest issues with these adventures is that the bad guys are usually like, say, level 12 or 14 when you start off at level 1. It's like, why don't they literally just teleport in, find the level 5 adventurers and kill them and call it a day? You know, it's
Right.
like, I mean, seriously, that's always a big issue. So it's very hard to make them challenging, and that's also why you do I mean, now we're talking about like adventure design, but like you have to have you basically use video games. Video games figured this out centuries ago, it seems. Like video games have figured this out a long time ago. You never fight the big bad right away. You fight their minions, you fight their bosses, and then you work your way up, you know? I mean,
right.
That's how you're supposed to do it. And that's how
what Lord of the Rings video game was literally that.
Yeah.
And like you had it explored that in detail, where you had like a reputation,
the nemesis system.
Yes, that's what it was.
Yes, which is not just a trademark, but is patented.
Wow.
Yeah, it's actually, everyone's annoyed because people loved it so much, this nemesis system, which
How do
was
you
so
patent
what?
That's like patenting the one-click purchase button.
Oh, dude. Well, they got the patent and they enforce it.
Patented the curved rectangle.
Dude, it's so annoying. So no other game has had it since, and everyone complains in the video game world. They're like, that system was so good, we loved it, it will never appear again, because
patents only last for 7 or 9 years or whatever.
Well,
yeah, that game. What was Middle?
Well, they came out with the sequel,
Shadows of Mordor. Is that the one?
The sequel sucked because it was filled with microtransactions like galore.
So there was a 2014 one.
That's it. That's
the sequel, right?
No, that's the original.
That's the original.
Yeah.
Okay. So when was the sequel?
I don't remember. A couple years later, but it's the Shadow of War sequel. Yeah, I forgot what it was. I never played
Shadow
this.
of War. Okay, yeah, I see. Middle Earth Shadow of War is 2017.
Yeah,
so depending on when the patent is, how long did they last? It may be up if they don't make another game quickly to extend the patent. So
yeah, people love that system. It was very cool. But anyhow, my point is, I hate to break it to you, movies have figured this out a long time ago. Video games have figured
can do
this
whatever
out
they want.
a
Movies can just
long
have
time ago.
people escape, and you don't have the actors like saying, "Hold on,
Fine.
I've been reading the script, and my character should have been able to catch them."
Video games have figured this out a long time ago.
Correct.
And they figured it out in multiple ways. You want sandbox? See how World of Warcraft does it. You want railroad? Well, most video games are railroads, you know, so it's pretty easy. You want frameworks? There's like Minecraft and a million other there's a way to see how video games successfully did it, and I hate to break it to you, they're very similar. I'll give you an example real quick. Back in the 90s, when I was doing a lot of DVDs, and in my DVDs we had everything. We had video production, audio production, animations, like you name it. But these actually were professional products for doctors to teach them like medical techniques. And where did I used to go to learn the best ways to handle this? I'd go to the Game Developers Conference, because it was the only thing that was even close to what I was doing was game development. But they had the exact same issues. It was like, they needed to do videos. I need to do videos. They need to do interactive design. I need to do interactive design. Like, it was one-to-one. It was like the content was different, but the technical issues were identical. And that's where funny. I learned that, you know what? These video games, yeah, they're different, but not really. There was this little thing that came out called Baldur's Gate 3 that seemed to be pretty popular. That seemed to figure out a lot of this adventure stuff. Anyhow, what's your whole take? We've been talking so much. What are you? I feel bad that we brought you on.
No, you're fine. What's my take? I think that, honestly...
He has no take after all that.
No, my take is that...
Well, what type of adventures do you like? How about that?
The type of adventure I like is generally more like the framework as you describe it.
Okay, framework.
Like, just give me like a tight scenario with some sort of ticking time bomb waiting to explode that the players just walk into. And okay, now we got to deal with the problem, because if we don't deal with the problem, something bad happens. And like, you know, you don't necessarily have to have, you can restructure that as a more railroady story rather than just being like, okay, well, you just found out that you're trapped in this castle and it's going to collapse because magic reasons in 3 days, and you got to figure out how to get out, and then you can't get out because of magic reasons, so you got to figure out how to turn off the magic. Just as a spitball idea, and that's fine. I think the problem is that there's just so much in the way of, like, I think about how I would write a railroad if I were to create a more railroady style adventure, and I don't necessarily think that I would do it much differently than an OSR adventure in its presentation. And I say that because I look at, especially some of the more railroady 5e adventures that Arcane Library has put out, Kelsey Dion. And, the production quality of the PDF is extremely straightforward. You have one page that indicates, like, this is the setup for this scenario. Here's all of the fluffy text you need to know. Here's some read aloud stuff that you can give your players. And at the end of the page, or at the end of the text on that one page, it's like, here's your goal. Like, here's what you're trying to get your players to do. Like, this is what you're trying to, carrot and stick, whatever you need to do. This is what you're trying to get your players to do. And once they do that, turn the page. And it becomes, a roller coaster at that point. But the presentation of her adventures is also just so much more succinct and usable, because one of the advantages of the PDF is that you can print the whole thing out and keep your maps to the side, and that's fine. But and I understand that is somewhat of a limitation with a book, but where is the intentionality of keeping everything that you need to run a given adventure, or a given scenario, on a 2-page spread in the book? Like, that just doesn't happen. And that is something that I find a lot of other smaller indie developers are keenly aware of. And so it's not to say that, like, a railroady adventure can't be a more, this is something that the OSR bros will say a lot over in that corner of the universe, that, it's just far more usable at the table. It's just, I don't need all of this fluffy information that I'm basically going to read to my players. And that's fine. That reflects the style of play. But at the same time, you can construct your railroad adventures such that the information you need for a given scene is presented in a very similar way to these other OSR adventures that have that figured out. And this is also a pitfall that, the thing that most modern OSR bros are saying, or contemporary OSR bros are saying, are critiques that were just as applicable to the older adventures that are like Keep on the Borderlands or Caverns of Thracia. And Cavern, no shade to Caverns, that's one of my favorite adventures. But if I were to respread that document, as a tool for the dungeon master to use, it's an abysmal piece. I mean, it's one of the first iterations of this in the hobby, but it's an abysmal display of how to do it. And a lot of that has to do with the technology available to Jadelle and Jaquays at the time. Like, she was just writing on a freaking typewriter and doing like laser scrape casts or whatever it was that they'd use to make photocopies of art back then. So a lot of that is, a limitation of the technology, but like, we don't have that excuse anymore. Like, we have desktop publishing software and a keen eye for design everywhere. So where is that in what should be the gold standard for this? And quite frankly, Wizards of the Coast has the budget to spread something like this out in multiple ways.
Your mic just went crazy.
Oh, did my mic go out?
No, it went.
No, it actually went wild and a little louder.
You sounded like you were in an echo chamber, but now you're back to normal.
Now I'm good. Okay.
Yes.
But yeah, no, like, so I get frustrated when I open up a WoTC adventure, like, for example, what is it? One of the Last Dragon. What is it? Or not Prince of the Apocalypse. I mean, pick any one of them. Mm-hmm. Even the last mines of Fendelver are subject to this, and the only reason it's less subject to it is because the adventures, like each little quest that you can go on in Lost Mines, is relatively succinct compared to the amount of weighty verbiage on text on paper that you get in something like the Prince of the Apocalypse, for example. So there's just, I mean, I feel like the writers are getting paid the same way Charles Dickens did, where they got paid by the word rather than paid by the right word, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I see what you're saying. So you're saying that one of the things is just the layout, the placing, and the intentionality of making things a smoother run based on where you can find the information is holding it back.
Exactly. Like if I open up the front page to Lost Mines of Fendelver in the entry level book, like enough intentionality should have been spent so that the dungeon map is actually a trifold page and like double opens, and all the text that I need to run, like, so I get the full map on one page, and all the text that I need to run that whole adventure, like, is edited in such a way that it's got, you know, lines that point to each room. And sure, you know, you can run the dungeon pretty railroady. I mean, it's kind of a 3-lane design from first-person shooter as far as that goes. There's 3 different paths you can take when you first enter the dungeon. So the players have a lot of choice there. But like, I should not have to be flipping back and forth between 8 pages to cross-reference the map to go back to the room description. Keep the map, or at least sections of the map that are relevant to the rooms on the page that I'm on. Like there's just no excuse for that in a multi-million-dollar corporation to not provide that base level of, you know, user comfort and ergonomics for the dungeon master. Like,
so like reproduce just the room that you're talking about,
like,
just that, like, one, grab it out and put it on the page in the corner with that room.
Right, like show me in the corner in a mini map, like not just the room that I'm in, but all of the rooms that are adjacent, and perhaps even the page number I need to turn to if the players go from the room I'm in to the next room. Like, show me what page that's on.
That's so that a cool idea.
So that when I flip to that, bam, I get another mini map that has the whole thing. And at the whole beginning of the venture, I should get like the full exploded dungeon map, sure. But that experience should just be for the DM to like orient themselves, and not as like, here's your dungeon map, now you got to flip 14 pages forward to get to this 800-word diatribe that talks about all this nonsense that the players don't really care about. It's a snooze fest if you're not extremely charismatic in your delivery. And, you know, okay, well, I'm playing with a bunch of players who don't really care about perception checks and they just want to treat it as a monster condo, so let's go to the next room. You know, so where's the facilitation of the, you know, making it easier for the dungeon master to run the adventure? Like, it boggles my mind. It's clear to me that there was no usability testing to say, you know, if dungeon masters have to look things up, they should not have to do that. Like, if you have the spells for a mini boss halfway through a dungeon on the stat block, like, make a truncated version of the stat block with truncated spell descriptions on the corner of the page. Have like the map of the room on the other corner of the page. Have whatever text you need to run that little encounter on the page, and everything you need to run this little mini boss encounter should be right there. I shouldn't have to go flipping through, you know, the player's guide to look up the nuances of this spell unless, you know, ridiculousness happens. It should just be right there. Like, that's the whole reason that the what's it called? The OGL and the SRD exists, so that we can take those concepts, so we can take that SRD material and put it in our adventure. Like, that's what the license is for, so that you can copy the text verbatim and put it in your own adventure. But Wizards of the Coast isn't even doing that with their own adventures. Like, where is that kind of support? If I'm about to fight some like weird demonic wolf, don't put the stat block for the wolf at the far end of the book or like on the next page. Put it right there on the page where I'm running it and show me what the encounter setup looks like on that page. I should never have to flip a page. That's my argument. And in that, Wizards of the Coast only is successful in not doing that insofar as where they have inadvertently demonstrated that they can get lucky in the succinctness of their adventure design. And the only two adventures I've seen them publish that way is The Lost Mines of Fendelver and The Curse of Strahd. Those are the only two adventures that I feel like have relatively successfully reduced page flipping, only because they were the first two adventures. They were very focused and they were very short in their wordiness. But people feel like, I guess, maybe whoever it is, more words means more money, which is batshit insane to me. Like, give me a 64-page adventure and I'll pay you the $70 as long as I can run it at the table.
Yeah, you're the
There you go.
You're the minority. That is, well, a few things.
I do think that I'm glad we had Baron here because I agree. Like, I took the neutral standpoint where I discussed these exact scenes, but for me, I personally do like having details. So I'm glad we have Baron here who does not like having them because it gives an outside perspective. I would say that those usability ideas are really, really good. But I think that even if Wizards completely used all of those usability ideas and further reduced box text and other details, that at least the people who are currently having problems with the adventures, a lot of them might have not their problems not reduced, but possibly even increased depending on what you take. And I say this as someone who doesn't like box text and would rather it not be in there for me. Right. That the box text is a usability issue for some GMs who are not good at creating something like that themselves.
I totally agree. Yeah, like, and all I'm saying, my point is that if there's nothing wrong with having like railroady box text, if that is your design goal, and if your players and your dungeon master like that, like, that's fine. All I'm saying is like the box text stuff should all be relevant to the page spread that it's on. Like, don't have a section of the dungeon or like a map that I have to read aloud on 2 prior pages. That's really all I'm asking. Like, you can, if it doesn't work out, like publishing document flow wise, you can always use artwork to blow out pages. It's like, well, I've got 2-page spread here. I've got to fill 800 words a column, and this section of the adventure only calls for 1,200 words. What do I do with the rest of it? Put a nice big piece of artwork. That's what you do. And then when they turn the page, they go to the next encounter in the adventure. Like, I'm not saying that like it necessarily has to be smaller or more concise. I'm saying just use the page spread so that as you turn the page, you properly go through the adventure such that you don't have to turn back.
Right. So we had a member chat from Mr. Blawface that said maybe RFC and Baron can make some adventures like that. It would be cool. And others in chat challenged Baron to take the free parts of Jewel of the Indigo Isles, which, by the way, does sometimes send you on pointers to other sections of the book, and create like the Baron version of that has a layout that does that with each room always on that page, all of the little sections put out so that you can run every creature off the page where it appears.
All right, so wait. I'm gonna as the person who does the design and layout of all these products, I'll tell you the counterpoint.
So,
takes more time.
No, that's not the counterpoint. The counterpoint is for this book and this adventure, this works because this is how it works. So what he does is that he has Ben has the overall map, and then for each section he has a mini map, and then he calls out the areas for the mini map, and that actually works very well because everything's on a 2-page spread. But there's a couple things. A, he has almost no art in this, so if you're gonna have no art, then this is easy to do. B, by putting these mini maps on all the pages, it will add hundreds of pages to your book, which is this weird catch-22. So it makes all your chapters significantly larger because you have less words on the page. Because you have I tried to do something similar to that, and it was getting out of control. Like, and I mean, like, I already have a 420-page book. If I did that, it would be like a 720-page book. Because it just, it makes so much less text, and it adds up very quickly. I get what you're getting at, but it just... It does this weird catch-22, like, okay, now the book is bigger, which means it has to be even more expensive because it's like when you start adding more pages.
How much more expensive though?
Significantly.
Okay, hold on. Can we do a chat? I
know how
gotta
much
press
it would
back
cost.
on this. I'm relatively aware of how much these
for WoTC, but WoTC will not go past. They won't go past 320 pages. That's their limit. Okay.
Sure, that's fine. Just make a shorter adventure. It's not like
No,
these
you're
players that
completely
are buying it.
Okay, you're right. For them, they could do it, and they actually have.
Right.
But
I'm not so sure. I want to say one thing, but I want then go back to Steven because he's got all the info on making it.
Yeah.
I truly believe, Baron, that if you went to WoTC, you talked about this idea, and everyone who was there was like, Baron, this is great. This increases the usability by a massive amount. It's going to be way easier to run. This is going to make their adventures perfect. We're going to credit Baron de Ropp, and we're going to do this on our next adventure. We will write it shorter so that it works out at the same number of pages because there's less adventure.
Right. So instead of
I guarantee
3 months of gameplay, you get a month and a half.
Yes,
No big
exactly.
deal.
I guarantee you that there'd be an outcry of like Wizards is being greedy, even though they were not being greedy. They legitimately just wanted to make it better, and they heard your idea here, trying to make it better.
Yeah, these are the terminal.
They put in the same number of pages, but there's only half as much adventure. They're just out for my money.
Yep. They'd be like,
exactly
it's all
what
maps. It's all repeat. It's like this is 80% the same maps over and over
literally,
again.
all they have to do is point at Keep of the Borderlands. Like that argument doesn't hold
well,
any
guess
water.
Doesn't matter
I'm sorry.
I'm going to tell you why it's all moot. Are you ready?
Okay.
Because they don't want you to buy the adventures. They want you to go online. And everything you described
that's for true.
is already online. Like, actually, everything you described, like, oh, the map is here and all yep, that's online. Like, if you're using a VTT, everything you described already happens. But this is the problem. When they create bad adventures in book form, there's still bad adventures online. Okay? They suck in both places. So
yeah, like, are they actually nailing all the storytelling beats? That's the next problem.
Not.
Which they're not.
To be clear,
not.
when Steven says bad adventures, in part, he is meaning adventures that don't hit his target on the axes of what the adventure should have, that are very light on the number of details and don't have what his group needs from an adventure.
Actually, I disagree. It's a little wrong.
Okay.
It's that, well, I'm going to tell you why. Because, like, the Vecna adventure, and when I went through the review in detail, like, there's a lot of issues with that in the overall structure. Like, for example, the entire adventure assumes that you are always doing it in order and you are always winning and always getting the next part of the Rod of 7 parts. And it never is, like, if you don't get the next piece, you literally can't go to the next part of the adventure. And so this adventure is actively trying to stop you from moving forward because it's an adventure, but yet there's no ways to get around that if you can't move forward. They never even have like a paragraph explaining, oh, what happens when you don't get the piece. But then later in the book, it says, well, if you didn't get all the pieces, this is what you do. So I was like, wait, so now at the very end, you say, if I don't get all the pieces, this is what you do. But you literally need the pieces to go to the next section of the book. So that's what, there's a lot of that in the book where it seems like two completely different teams are working on this book and neither team is talking to one another because there's like huge contradictions in that book.
What it sounds like is there was a contractor who was tasked to write the book. And
no, there wasn't. I know who worked on it. That's whoever designed it. But my point is, I'm going to postulate that there is a fourth type of adventure that no one does except for us, because no one is insane like we are. And Mark, since you run it and know the book very well, that Jewel of the Indigo Isle is actually a story. It's an actual book story that has an adventure inserted into it. Because one of the things people do like about this, because I've read the reviews and I've talked to the GMs, and what they like is that we went into so much detail and we went into so much background and so much that they feel like they understand the adventure, the motivations of everyone, the world, how it works. Is that when when the players ask the GM questions, why is this? They don't have to make stuff up, because they're like, well, there was a whole thing about the history of this area and what it was about, so they know. And whether or not that is actually ever used in the adventure itself, it might never come up, but it's there for the GM, and all the GMs who have run this, and Mark probably knows this because he's seen the same reviews, they really like running this adventure because we give them a whole world to use. And if they want to run it and don't read the call out text, you don't have to. You don't have to run it as written, but it's there on purpose. We give a lot of information and we give a lot of options. We give a lot of sidebars. I have all these sections that say, what if the PCs lose? We literally call it out 24 times of like, okay, if the PCs lose, this is how you continue the adventure. Like, we actually have everything I can think of, we put plans, in here. Yeah. Right. And it's really kind of a story. You could read it and just have the story. And oh yeah, there's an adventure there too, by the way.
So viewers who are watching the stream, you know exactly what I'm going to say in response to this, which is that Steven himself almost even directly said it, even though he claimed it was a fourth type of adventure, which it definitely is not.
I know.
It is an adventure that is extremely high on the details axis. As he said, it has more details than almost any other adventure would have. It has you covered. And for someone who wants to have all those details, all those contingencies, for someone who that is the main usability issue, as opposed to what is on the page, and what like having to flip through pages, which is a usability issue. I want to be clear. I agree with Baron. That's a usability issue. But for some GMs, that's not as much of a big usability issue as just that there isn't anything and they have to come up with something while also knowing it's a railroad and they might throw things off the railroad. So because it's so extreme on having a lot of details, that means for people who are finding that the published adventures do not have enough details, that you're going to like Jewel of the Indigo Isles because it goes very far in the other direction. Whereas Baron, I think, wouldn't like Jewel of the Indigo Isles that much, because what it does well is what Baron doesn't need, because with his GMing style, he'd rather posit an overall sort of mystery or puzzle. I don't mean this in the terms of a literal puzzle, but like a puzzle, a situation for the group to figure out how they're going to do it in their own way, even if it's not wide open like a sandbox. And that is not necessarily what Jewel always does. Sometimes it does with dungeons of like, how are you going to take on this dungeon? And there's a lot of different ways to go about it, but it does it with more details than you would probably want.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. What someone wrote, if you squint a little, Jewel resembles a movie, and they're not wrong. It basically is a movie. it is. Oh, it totally. It's actually
Steven intentionally used movies.
No, it is. It's a complete movie, and I wrote it and designed it as a movie, as a trilogy, and it totally is. In fact, when people play it, they're like, "Holy crap!" Because I won't get into it. I've gone through this many times. I used the exact same tropes, the exact same methods in movie making that was written in the adventure. So when people read, like, this feels like a movie, I'm like, exactly, because it is basically. We did have
a page 80 crash and everything.
We did have a super chat, and I want to answer this because Bob McDowell, who's been around, his 10th super chat. He goes, I like the axis type analysis, but I think you're off the mark. Could the mid result be it could instead be outsourcing to dispassionate freelancers who aren't in love with the end product? So I can say no, because I'm going to tell you why. You see this book here, this Eve of Ruin, the Vecna.
It's written by passionate, and talented writers.
Okay.
Just period.
Two of the 4 writers for this book wrote this book. Okay.
They are 2 of the 5 writers for that book. 5, I think.
Right. No, there's 4. There's Yeah.
There's 2 of the 4 for Vecna are 2 of the 5 for Jewel.
Oh yeah,
Because
yeah.
you
Sorry,
put yourself
sorry.
as one of the writers. You're correct that there's only necessarily
Oh, I
4
just
for
meant- I
Jewel,
just
but
said
you
2 of
wrote
them.
so much outline you deserve to be listed as a writer on Indigo House. It was like 65,000 words of outline.
Well, plus I rewrote like
Yeah.
a lot of it. But
So-
anyhow,
So there's 5.
So anyhow, this book, the people who wrote this book. I know them personally. I've worked with them. They are fantastic writers. They're some of the best adventure designers in the business, period. So
They were in-house writers.
Yes.
And I can tell you that freelancers sometimes bring the sizzle, because if you have a large pool of freelancers, you can actually find someone who really loves and knows what it is, even if you don't have someone in-house who is doing that. So I think that it being based on freelancers particularly is off the mark. Only a few of the D&D adventures, I think, heavily used, and they were mostly anthologies who heavily used freelancers.
yeah, they use.
And I don't think that is that is related, and I don't. It's going to be hard to say whether or not people had passion for the product they're working on, but I can't imagine that people didn't have passion working for a D&D adventure, because D&D is a brand that we all, or I think a lot of people, just love and have loved from childhood or from whenever we started playing the game. Like, imagine someone asked you, hey, do you want to write for an adventure for D&D? For a lot of people, and then maybe now, I don't know if you're watching this, you maybe be like, well, I'm soured on the corporate ethics or whatever. But even so, I think a lot of people would be like, that's really exciting. That's an amazing opportunity. I'm interested in doing that. I don't really think you've got these hypothetical people being like, oh, I don't even really like D&D, but I guess I'm writing for it anyway. That's not what I think.
Yeah. And
so I've had anecdotal feedback and experience, Mark, from not one but 2 different, and they're not supposed to say anything, so I'm not going to share their names. 2 different people who have worked for or contracted with Wizards of the Coast for adventure writing, and both of them have made lamentations to me about how the experience left them feeling diminished in their autonomy, on their creative expression in their adventure writing.
I know
And
who one
it
of
was-
those people are, by the way.
It was.
I mean, there's some
it was
people who have gone
such to the
public about
point.
that.
Yeah.
It
yeah.
was such to the point that they just wanted to write it to get it done.
Yeah.
And they just needed, at that point, it was to the level that they just wanted the resume points. And it was not fun for them at the end of the project. So if that was the experience of any of these writers as well, then that could
Okay.
also negatively impact the
You know what,
quality
Baron?
of the product.
I was not thinking of that, and you could be right. Right? If these writers are someone who's very passionate about D&D,
Right.
they love it, they were like, oh my gosh, yes, I get to write about this topic. But then executive meddling came in and we're like, well, actually, though, we have 30 marketing goals that you have to reach and do this and this and this. And they're like,
Right, and you
please,
have
no,
to
I
put
just
all
want
of
to
these
write this.
nonsensical things that don't jive with the pitch that I gave you at the beginning of this project. Like, if the creative said, I would like to do an adventure that does XYZ, and then you get halfway through and executives say, well, you also have to do ABC, or you can't do XYZ. Even if, like, in your mind, ABC makes no connection to XYZ, then you just have to do it and make the best that you can of it, and it completely alienates you from your own labor.
I suppose that's possible. And I want to point out that it is true that even if the designer and developers are just like, no, you know what? This is a problem, but we're going to power through it, and they keep their optimism. It can just be an issue, as I mentioned in a previous video where we talked about a similar topic, that executive meddling can be an issue on its own. Even if at the end, there's still optimism and enthusiasm about the product from everyone who worked on it, they'd be like, yeah, I'm still optimistic about it because I like this topic. I had fun with it overall, but maybe if the executives or the marketing hadn't added in these 10 things, like, that's already going to be something that might diminish the product from a usability perspective if something like that happened. And we don't know for sure that it did or not, but there's certainly some factors, like when Steven went into Vecna, Steven he looked through, and a lot of the set pieces individually he liked. He's called them either good or great for most of them.
Yeah.
But that the connective tissue, like he said today during the stream, he found to be a little weaker. And I think, and Linda, who was on the stream, thought that the page count and the number of things that they were being forced to put into it in a relatively short page count for the format was like inevitably going to lead to some of the things that caused issues with Steven on that. So like, I think you're right that the way that the higher ups came in with a lot of cooks stirring the pot could be part of it.
I think so. By the way, the reason I was so excited for this book is that two of the authors of this book, Eve the Vecna, wrote my book, and the lead on this is Amanda, who I know. So I knew 3 of the 4 authors personally. I know their work. I know what they can do. They're all very good. They all work for Paizo. And on top of that, this was supposed to be this cool planet hopping multi-dimensional adventure with Vecna, which is awesome. And it was like, it had all the hallmarks of, you ever see like a trailer? This is a perfect analogy. You see a trailer for a movie and the trailer is great. And you're thinking, oh my God, that is going to be such a good movie. And then you go see the movie and it's a disconnected mess. And it's not that great. That's what this was. It's like, wow, everything is here to make a good movie. But then when you actually see it, you're like, yeah, that was not a good movie. And it had all the set pieces, and it had the stars that we wanted, but they weren't used.
I just gotta interject.
Yeah.
One of my favorite films that is that film.
Okay.
Are you familiar with the film Ishtar?
Oh. I was alive. I was a kid when that came out. That was famous.
So bad.
That movie's terrible.
1987.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be an adventure comedy starring Dustin Hoffman.
Yeah, and
about two American musician idiots who are trying to land a record deal and get into the music industry and get caught up in a communist Islamist bath party mockery political mix-up with the CIA, and how they accidentally become the holders of a prophecy that got lined into the back of their jacket. And it's like all of these constituent pieces, when I describe what the plot of Ishtar is to somebody, they're like, oh my God, and it's got Dustin Hoffman in it. And it's like a comedy religious caper that involves the CIA and like.
Well, not only that, it was crazy expensive. So it was like
crazy. And they have like insane RPGs, and they shoot helicopters in the desert.
It's a terrible movie. But anyhow,
fantastic concept. Absolutely terrible movie.
Yeah, I mean,
everything that you could want in a film is in that. It's just a terrible mix.
I guarantee everything I've heard from everyone who's worked at WoTC is that what they submit is never even close to what comes out at the other end when it comes to adventure writing.
Right.
It's like it goes through. But you know what? Okay, I'm gonna give an example from my real life world. Okay, because the problem when you have these big companies with multiple divisions and corporations, all this is that. This happens, but I'll give you this is a fascinating example. This happens pretty often. Is that I design my company. We make big websites for large corporations, and one of the things we'll do in the beginning is that we'll often do multiple layouts and designs. But most of my websites are actually done in pharmaceuticals, and the rules with pharmaceutical. There's a lot of rules, and I won't get into them. There's a lot of regulatory you got to keep track of. So you have to be very careful with your messaging and the colors and the style and all of that, depending if it's for patients or physicians. So anyhow, we recently did a website, and there was 2 versions of the site. We did this one version that had all these colors and had contrast. Contrast mark, my favorite. Lots of contrast, lots of pictures,
repetition,
alignment, proximity.
Proximity.
It had, and so I had one that had lots of colors, lots of contrast, and then one that's all muted, very clean, but so muted that it just ends up being a white slate, like it becomes nothing. And we we were asked to do both. There was a few other designs, and then the corporate bigwigs selected the plain vanilla, like simple layout and design.
Managers.
And
You're also conservative and reserved.
I strongly recommended not to go with that. And everyone on the team was like, yeah, we really wanted the colorful one, but the managers are saying, but here's the thing, they're not designers, okay? They do not do this for a living for 30 years, okay? They just don't have the experience we do. So they're hiring us for our expertise, and then they're ignoring it. Cut to a year later, and guess what? I mean, fine by me. I got to do the job twice. We're redesigning the website. And hey, they want color and they want pictures now. And I was like, I wonder why. Because I told you this was going to happen. And it sure enough did happen. And I've seen this happen so many times in my industry, but it's different because I'm doing websites. So you get,
not just websites, pharmaceutical websites.
Well, pharmaceutical website. But the point is, I have a better one. I had it. This is a client of mine in California that they gave us a site. We told them to do it one way. They did it another way. And then they came back to us a second time. They came back to us again, a second time. They're like, okay, we're going to redesign the site. Which way should we do it, A or B? I'm like, you got to do it A. They did it B. And I was like, oh, again. And then they came back to us a third time. And I was like, and then at that point, those two teams
this would be my favorite contractor or my favorite client to work with, because I get to charge them twice.
No, this time was 3 times, because then what happened is they came back.
Yeah, exactly.
And they fired the other 2 people. They're like, okay, we're finally listening to you, and you could do it your way. And I was like, how much money did you waste on the first 2? And they're like, oh, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm like, I know. I'm like, why? It's like, we are professionals. We know what we're doing. You're hiring us because we know what we're doing. And if you want to know why, like, I explain it. I'll go into detail. I'm not just saying, take this one. Why? Because I said so. I'm like, oh no, I'll go through why it's better. And why it's worse. I'll go through both. I'll say, here's the advantages, here's the disadvantages of each. And there's more advantages with this one, like if you feel like, but anyhow, the point is that I feel that this is happening, is that passionate designers are writing these adventures. And for whatever reason, which I think I know, and I won't talk about because I'll get a lot of people in trouble, is they are getting heavily neutered, and that is why there's so much disconnect in these adventures, because there was connective tissue, but by neutering it and rewriting sections, no one goes back to make sure that the connective tissue was still there. So then you have sections that are referring to prior sections that don't exist. And I know these people, I don't think they're that bad at their job that they weren't writing the sections in the beginning, middle, and end. So sometimes you get this disconnect of middle, and end, like beginning, middle, and end. By the way, this happens in movies too. If you want to look up something fascinating, you've seen The Lost Boys, right, Baron? You ever seen The Lost Boys?
I don't think I have, actually.
Oh my God, it's only a classic. All right, for everyone else, I know Mark hasn't seen it. So everyone else, The Lost Boys is It's a fantastic movie. In fact, there's a scene in The Lost Boys where they're looking at Dragon magazine, and I had a contest for people to figure out what magazine it was, because you only saw the cover and you didn't see the number, and it was very blurry. And we actually did it like on Discord or something. We figured it out as to what version or what number of Dragon magazine it was. It's actually in the movie. Anyhow,
does it have John Travolta in it?
No. That is like
okay.
It's I forgot, but it has was a Joel Schumacher movie. It's a very good movie. It's about vampires in California. There is an entire sub chapter about working in the video store with this woman who was one of the co-stars of this movie. She's not in the movie at once. Like, she's not even in the movie ever. They cut her completely because they were going to do this Lost Girls sequel. So they decided to completely take her out. And because of that, there are scenes that don't quite make sense, but it doesn't derail the movie. It's just one of those, that doesn't seem to really make sense. It's because they literally cut out an entire subplot that was like one of the co-stars of the movie. So this happens all the time. Okay, look at the extended version of Lord of the Rings, which is another, or the Return to the King. They added another freaking hour to that movie. Okay, you want to see something that's amazing? They redid Sylvester Stallone recut using the same footage. He recut Rocky IV from beginning to end. And the new cut is vastly superior than the original cut.
Using the published footage?
Using unpublished and published footage.
Okay. So he had the full cutting room
Yes,
floor.
he had the full cut.
Okay.
And people are like, this is amazing. It's like a totally different movie, and it's way better because there was a lot of things that were cut because it had to be an hour. Back then, movies couldn't be more than 90 minutes because that's how movies were in the 80s, and it had to be very political. It had to work, and it was more like a music video than actual movie. And the new one's like, he put in a lot more story and nuance and detail, so it's a much better movie. My point is, this happens all the time, okay? Things get cut, but this is the difference between a director and producers and the studio heads, which you hear a lot. The studio heads are the ones that cut because they just want to cut, but they have no concept of what they're cutting, why they're cutting, and what the end result will be. As opposed to the directors, who you hear these fights all the time where they're like, the studio heads want me to cut this, but it's not going to make any sense, therefore I refuse. And then they usually will like either go down with the ship or take a salary cut because they believe in their vision so strongly, things like that. This happens constantly in Hollywood. And right now, I don't think there's anyone who can push back. I think it's basically they being WoTC, the authors submit their material, someone at the top is cutting it to pieces, and then we get these adventures that are disconnected and milquetoast, and unfortunately, they're not going back to anyone to oversee and reconnect everything. So that's why. That's my postulation.
No, I would agree with that completely.
Okay, we answered the question. We're done.
We gave a large number of different possible answers, some of which we've said in previous streams before, like about the changes, and then did they have enough time and phase for oversight? Some of which we've never said before, and I'm very interested in seeing what people's thoughts are about the idea that adventures have axes, and people who are talking about them during the adventure's heyday the most are the ones who don't match the adventures, whereas in the future, people will go back and talk about the ones they liked. But I think Baron's point about usability is good too. Like, all of these are possible reasons, but by being the front runner, by being the big brand in the room, everyone who has any kind of critique about it is going to address it more about the Wizards one. So, for instance, Baron's critique about having to flip through pointers, that applies equally well to Paizo Adventures or Jewel of the Indigo Isles from us, and for many third-party creators who actually, overall in the community, have a more positive vibe about their adventures than you generally hear about D&D, and that's because D&D is the magnet. Anything we don't like about adventures, we still probably read the D&D adventure because it's the big one. And like Baron,
you're learning from that adventure rather than other ones.
Bingo. And so, like, you probably mostly read all the adventures from the thing you like the most about how they deal with the adventures, plus D&D. So out of those, the D&D adventure is probably going to be, for someone who reads an eclectic type of adventures, not just D&D, it's going to be the one that is least to your style of all the ones that you know, because it's just the most famous one.
Oh, well. Well, Infinite Staircase comes out, I don't know if I'm going to get it. I was so excited for Vecna, although that was one of our best performing episodes, so maybe I will get it and do a mini review of it.
Infinite Staircase.
Well, it's because it was timely. because it came out like the day that was the first day you could get it. It had specific details.
Well, I'll come out
and
with
we
that.
looked into it.
Oh, I can buy it. I mean, I can go down and get it. That's not an issue. I mean, so if you get it from, well, if you order it online, you get it, by the way. So you get it the same day. Or if you have a flag near you, like a good one. I mean, I have like the flagship in Manhattan. I have Complete Strategist, so they get everything the day it comes out. But it's also an hour away from my house, and I have to drive into the city, so it's a pain. So I don't know if I care that much about the Infinite Staircase. It's also lots of mini adventures. But Zargon is
I love the old AD&D tales from the Infinite Staircase. That was cool.
I know. And Zargon is like one of my favorite. I don't know. It's just stop killing my favorite adventures.
They're not killing them. They're still around.
Okay,
Well,
let me
I don't
stop.
know. Maybe I'll feel frisky and rip all the text out of it and relay out the entire book
What?
in the way that I was
You would
saying.
never. What,
Ooh.
mine? Or
No. The quest for the Infinite Staircase.
Oh, you would never
And
do
just
that.
rip out all the text
You would
and
never do
relay
that.
it out
Never.
exactly like reuse all their same artwork assets and everything.
Never.
Just completely destroy the PDF. Use all
People
kinds of
are- yeah,
piracy
you know what?
software
Is
to
that,
pull it out.
is that okay? Will you get in trouble for
No,
doing
actually,
that?
if you
If
publish,
you don't sell it,
no,
it's fine.
wrong. You can't sell it if you do that and then sell it on DM's Guild. That's legal.
You're right.
Yeah, and you can make money
you're
off of
right.
it.
Yeah, you could and sell it on DM's Guild
Oh
as like
man,
the Baron
the usability
card.
edition.
Yeah.
Oh.
I honestly think that seriously could be something that people would be interested in, because I've seen people publish other versions
There's
of Strahd or things like
tons.
that
Yeah.
on
Oh, no,
DM's
that's-
Guild.
That's
if you
a
go to
fun
DM's
idea.
Guild, there's a whole subsection of how to fix Vecna, and there'll be like
Yeah.
50 modules, supplements designed for how to add to Vecna and how to fix
Right.
it. Okay, that's like a
But
whole.
I guess you have
Yeah.
to be careful about which
Right,
what
there's
amount
certain
of things
things-
that you can put
Yeah,
into it, because
yeah.
obviously you wouldn't be able to make one that was called "I'm just redoing this new adventure and
Yeah.
selling it on DM's Guild for less money than the original version" or something
Yeah,
like
I
that.
forgot
right?
how they.
And
Actually,
it couldn't include everything that's in there, because otherwise, what's going on?
Right, you can't do
You
it.
can use the trademarked concepts.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Copyright law, the way that people perceive the permissions around copyright and trademark law is real strange. Like, they give you license to reuse the characters. They don't give you license to reuse the text as it exists on the page.
Right.
So
Probably not the art, or do you?
you'd
get the
have
art?
you'd have to basically just churn it through ChatGPT so that it's technically different text.
Oh,
Okay, fine.
wait. I heard this. This is a total aside.
I think that
Here's a fun thing for ChatGPT and all the AI robots. They're starting to cannibalize themselves, because you know how basically they scrape the internet? They're scraping
yeah.
each other. So now we're getting all these hybrids, and they're getting worse
it's
and
bad.
worse.
It's
So
bad. The overtraining problem is a serious thing.
it's really getting bad. I was like, they're saying, yeah, because now they're scraping, like, it's like poor stuff. It's scrapingly poorly designed AI junk, so it's getting worse and worse. It's like inbreeding.
I know that's exactly the only thing that it needs to be scraping anymore for data is like news events. I
Yeah.
feel like
It's
that's the
becoming a
only
real
thing it should
problem.
be scraping. Yeah,
Yeah.
but they were using AI to write news articles back in 2012. So whatever.
Yeah, that's been around for a long time. The
Yeah.
AI news articles, or the baby articles, basically like the rewrites of like sporting events, things like that. That was all done
Right.
by AI.
That was all done by AI.
Yeah, because it's easy. It's numbers and facts.
It's extremely formulaic.
Yeah, exactly.
I
These
remember-
players got these stats. These
Yeah.
players got these stats.
Yeah,
Here's the
it's really easy to do.
chronological list of a insert emphatic emotional word here for each
Yeah.
play event where the momentum.
I remember
changed,
with sports
etc.
in particular, when I was researching AI, not that kind of AI exactly, but there was a talk at the MIT's CSAI lab, specifically from someone whose thesis was that they were like one of the first people who created a like AI commentator for like robots were playing soccer and the commentator was in real time looking at the video and then trying to say what was going on in
Oh, that's
that
fun.
soccer game. Yeah. But that was over a decade ago when that was state of the art.
Yeah. No, like the whole AI hype, it's like you got to have good, clean input, everyone. Don't freak out. Everyone freaks out about AI coming to take your jobs. No, not really.
Not yet.
Not unless you're just a button pusher.
Some jobs.
I mean,
we'll
we don't
see.
know what's going to happen moving forward. So I wouldn't be so quick to dismiss it, Baron. But on the other hand, like I think it's natural to be afraid of.
If you do
something that
stuff
looks
like
like it's
data
close.
entry, yes. If you do stuff like data entry, 100%, that's getting moved out. But you know,
So, all right. I mean, we talked about a lot of subjects.
we did.
I actually really want you to read my adventure, though, Baron. I know you never will.
Okay.
He's not going to like it because it's the high
I
on the
think he
details,
actually
and
will.
he
No,
likes
no,
all the
No,
details.
I actually think he will because I think
It has page flipping.
yeah, it does have page flipping, but
monsters are in the
I
back.
will ignore that part of
well,
it.
wait, but I actually went through great lengths to try to minimize that because some maps are big, but I actually call out sections. We do a lot of cross-referencing. I make sure, okay, little things like this. Like I hate when you would put in a order for a room and it would like have things in the read out loud text that you shouldn't be reading out loud. Okay, like
Yes,
that,
100%.
there's zero of that in my book. Like
Yeah.
everything in the read out loud text is things the PC should know.
The other thing I
sure.
hate about read aloud text is when there's clearly a giant monster that is in this room,
Right.
and that is the first thing you're going to notice, but that the read aloud text, because it's like the industry standard is don't include the monster, it'll give you these little details where it'll be like, there's a room that's like an old destroyed library with a giant crab that attacks you immediately. And they'll be like, this library looks like it's seen better days. There are books scattered across the floor, and you see little different texts. And here are some of the titles of some of those books, tattered fragments that are, you can notice the browning at the edges of each page. And it's just like, I was attacked by a giant crab. I didn't notice any of that. until
Yeah,
I killed
exactly.
the giant
It's
crab.
like lurking in the after you get through 400 words of diatribe about mold on the edges
Yeah.
of books.
Well,
All of a sudden, goblins spring from behind the bookcase.
we do that. We make sure. Put it this way, everything like the order of the rooms were also very specific. Like the way we laid out each room, because I hated when things were like in the wrong order, so we made sure each room is laid out. There's lots
Right.
of ways to deal with the adventure. In even parts where like it's going to get railroady, we call it out. We literally say, okay, this part is going to like they're going to be, because there's a lot of ticking clocks in this adventure. Like there, that is pretty much
Right.
the definition of this adventure. It's like but we'll say, okay, once you get to this point, the clock starts. So be aware.
Right.
We even say, like, you might not want to start this part if it's getting close to the end of the night, because you want to have this as one long continuous session. Like, that's how much I call it out. Like, we really
Right.
go the extra mile so that you can read this and know how to run it as a GM.
For me, I think that it has some of the best usability for an adventure because I don't have the same usability concerns as Baron has as much, even though I agree those are real concerns and that every change he suggested would make it more
once you
useful.
experience running an adventure with that stuff, you will become immediately frustrated anytime you try to run an adventure with it. Like if you have ever had to stick your finger into 3 different places
have.
in the book.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Once you
I
do
have,
that,
and I have to do that in Jewel.
except,
And I
you
have
do.
done it with. I've done it without the flipping, and I do like it better without the
wait,
flipping.
I'll show you.
but-
I've shown this before. This is how I do my adventures. So I print them all out, and then I have pages. And then I put notes, heavy notes on each page. So this way I can cross-reference. Also, my guys will go anywhere and do anything, so I can't count on them like in the right place at the right time. So
I can't count on them.
I can't. So I prepare everything for that area, the section, and then I put notes so I know what to call out and like what's important in a room. And so, but this way
Right.
also I have them on single pieces of paper. And this way I could just put them in, I lay them out however I want. That's how I run my adventures.
So for me, I do want to say, I guess I tried to stay neutral mostly about these axes, and I admitted that I'm detail heavy for published adventures. For the most part, I like to either run my own adventure entirely or run a detail-heavy adventure. The reason for this is I like improvising a lot, but if I run a detail-light adventure and I improvise, where they let me improvise, I may have just thrown off a bunch of other stuff later on when I filled in this other stuff with my own, and then at that point, I might as well just be doing it all.
Oh, by the way, we have
Essentially,
questions.
that's sort of where I'm at, is that I take these things to the two big extremes. So if it's pre-published, I want to make sure that it's taken into account everywhere, so I don't do something that like gives myself trouble later on in the book, which is sort of related to the idea of pointers and having to flip through between pages, I suppose, but it's not exact. It's a sort of a second order knock-on effect of that.
So Trey the Small asked, would Jewel of the Indigo Isle be all right for younger players? Yes. We have a lot of younger players. It's designed to...
Yes, but
I'm going to get to the but. Yes, but there are some I call it a Pixar adventure. It's very Pixar, that there's some
Toy Story.
Very scary, very disturbing areas, but that's on purpose. And we call it out and explicitly tell you how to fix it if you have younger adventures.
Exactly. Because if you look at the art for Jewel of the Indigo Isles, it's brightly colored. You just even showed it off. People, in fact, some people have, without like reading or seeing what themes are in the book, been like, I'm turned off because it's so brightly colored. I think this is only for children. And it's not only for children. In fact, those areas may need changes for young children that have a little bit of like some like creepy or dark themes, but we call that part out. It does have the bright colors. It does have some fun and just cheerful stuff that happens sometimes too. So it's kind of good for all ages, and you can adjust it to be a little darker for a group that wants to do that, or a little more lighthearted for a younger group. So Pixar is a great example, Stephen. They always have some disturbing stuff in Pixar movies at some point.
Yeah. It gets really. In fact, it's funny because there's a
creepy
podcast.
Mutilated doll.
Oh yeah, well that's on purpose, by the way.
Yeah.
So
That's
the
scary.
reason Pixar does it, and the reason we do it too. So basically, when you do these, when you're doing jarring jumps in emotional depth, it actually will create a permanent synapse in your brain when these are done correctly. Pixar is very good at doing this. So like when you're watching Finding Nemo, and then suddenly they're underwater in the deep area, and then they see Bruce the shark. That is so jarring when you see that from the beginning of the movie to the Bruce the shark, and scary that I still can remember. I remember seeing it in the movie because that's what they did on purpose, and they're very, very good at it. And because that creates a permanent memory, you permanently remember it, and that's why you remember Pixar movies and forget others. We do the same thing in our adventure because you're like, oh, we're having so much fun. Oh my God, what the heck just happened? Like, it happens a lot. And in the podcast, Mark, they just finished book 2, and they had that entire section. They were like, oh my, they were just horrified. And I was listening to it. I was like, I'm so happy. I was like, oh, they hate it. This is wonderful.
Wait, they hate it, or they loved
it, but they were like, this is disgusting. Okay. And I was like, thank you, God, it worked perfectly. They were like, I went out of here so bad. I was like, it worked.
That's what you were going for.
I know. That's why I was so happy. I was like, it worked exactly as planned.
That reminds me.
Justice plan.
So there was one dungeon room that one of the dungeon masters, DM Scotty, ran at Green Dragon Fest. That was that room to the maximum, and it will go down in infamy. It was the lotion room. It was a room with nothing but a pool of lotion. And I can't remember. I never played in the adventure, but I heard about it from so many people because it was so creepy. But I can't remember if it was like a goblin or like just a really creepy
It doesn't
old
even
man.
matter what it is. Just tell me the
Just
lotion room I've already
had
lotion
lotion in his pocket.
room. I was like, that's enough. I already will remember that.
And I remember seeing the terrain for it. It was just like this off-white, glossy sheet of lotion.
Nasty. But that is like, maybe one day we should do a super advanced like writing adventure stream. Like not a low level. You know what? We get James Jacobs on and do that.
Something more than level 10.
No, not even. No, I'm not even talking about high level. I'm talking about like advanced adventure writing techniques of like really advanced writing techniques. Little things like that. Like there's a lot of little things that we do in the adventures and how you hook them.
We could also have Linda on for that.
Oh, Linda,
she was the head of the adventure department at Paizo for a while.
Oh no, so, I would. It's not that I wasn't thinking of Linda.
Yeah, I know.
I just wanted to get James on.
Give me another example.
To get James Jacobs on the show, basically.
He would have come for Savage Tide if it had been a few hours
get
later,
him on
so
again.
It was on Pacific time.
I'll plan it with him. I'll plan it and get him on. Because I definitely want to talk. I got to reread it though. I haven't read it in so long. Oh, we got. Dragon Arc? I don't know. With the recent additions of the large races in Howl of the Wild and the upcoming release of Player Core 2, will you guys be releasing an errata balance or new additions to the original Dragon Ancestries?
Okay.
Mark, you wrote Dragons. That's all you, baby.
All right, so we're not going to be changing the books that are already out. For one thing, because some of the new content is Orc licensed and some of the old books are OGL books. However, we will, looking at the amount of power creep on flying creatures in particular, which is not the one you said there, we will be creeping to match the creep that was also retroactively applied to old Paizo Ancestries, so that you can get your permanent flight on very flying specific ancestries, including Dragon, by level 9. And we're going to be putting that in Secret Dragons, the new Orc compliant books that are coming out. There are some other changes as well to match Orc. In terms of large ancestries, we already had them. We had Minotaurs before Howl of the Wild, and it has almost exactly the same rules for the large Minotaur as the one that was in Howl of the Wild in terms of how the large size part of it was done. Mm-hmm. And you can use the feats from both together and it'll work out. So we're not going to be changing how we do the large ancestries because like Giant and Minotaur, because it's already the same way that was in Howl. But we will be changing for very flying specific ones that just kind of have flying, like Nephilim in Pathfinder Player Core. They still go up to 17. I feel like 9 and 17 is too big of a gap. So we're going to move those to 13, which is where the flying used to be before for the ones that were sort of kind of semi-flying. So we're going to do 9-13 versus 1-5-9 for flying. Other than that, we'll make small changes to match things into Orc for the new Orc ones that we are going to be putting out. We are also planning on next year's Year of Blank, which was not been announced, to be Orc based by Orc/OGL for 5e by putting in legendary and mythical versions of creatures that does not rely specifically on Dungeons and Dragons OGL IP or Paizo's Orc IP to get the job done. So that is my answer to that super chat question.
Yeah, we have we literally just released Giants, so we did. We have large ancestors
by Jessica Catalan, and people are a lot of people are really liking it. It is the first ancestry in the game that can, through ancestry feats alone, become permanently huge and get to Gargantuan temporarily, as far as I can remember.
What about Dragon?
That uses class feats to do that.
Oh,
but Giant is the first one that can do it through ancestry feats alone.
Correct. So I could be a giant dragon?
That would be pretty interesting. I guess you could be a giant dragon. Also, honestly, if we do our compilation book for legendary creatures, which is very, very likely, I think Giants is one of the ones that's likely to have a stretch goal for like an archetype, so you could use class feats to get bigger sooner and maybe even Gargantua permanently. So we'll figure it out as we move along.
My favorite chat of the day was by Nim, who said, "Don't make butter with your kids in the Indigo Isles."
Oh, Nim knows exactly what they're saying.
Oh, I know what they're saying, because that's the first thing when you're like, everything is, that's not good. that's the beginning of the nasty.
It's a bad situation.
It's really
A
bad.
family had a bad thing happen when a monster got into their house, and that's all I'll say to avoid
Really
spoiling.
bad. Let's just say when I go bad, I go all the way, baby.
There's easy ways to take care of it so it's not as bad by removing certain descriptions from that house. So you just go and fight the monster. It's a quick fix. It doesn't
But if
change
you look
the overall
very closely
adventure,
on the
but
map, it's pretty disgusting. But yeah,
it's pretty bad.
I'll tell you offline, Barry. You'll love it. So
So we'll leave you with that kind of disturbing note, I guess.
yeah,
right?
that's a good way to leave it. Leave
Yeah.
it with a
All right.
disturbing note.
Then until next time, everyone, if you want to battle the zoo, you have to roll for combat. We'll see ya.
Bye.